Every country in the Americas has a tamale tradition, but it's a really old food that's been preserved and traveled with native people.
The idea of consuming corn-based dough wrapped around various meats, cheeses, and other foods dates back to 8000 BC Mesoamerica.
I always tell people tamales are kind of like a burrito, but instead of the flour tortilla, it's covered in moist cornbread and then wrapped in a corn husk.
For Knoxville, the tamale tradition began in 1887 when a man by the name of Harry Royston introduced a hearty Hispanic dish to the city.
He had been like a carny, like a guy that traveled with carnivals, selling fun food to customers, and had picked up tamales somewhere, learned how to make them, and they're kind of complicated. It's not a simple thing to make a tamale, but he started selling them here in 1887 to both black and white Knoxville, more or less. He would sell, he had a hand cart on the streets and would roll it to wherever the people were.
Royston walked the streets of downtown Knoxville, bellowing his catchphrase, "They're hot, red hot, they're Harry's." Royston also sold classics like hot dogs and ice cream, but the tamale was a unique food experience for Knoxville's residents.
It is remarkable because there were almost very, very few people of Mexican or Latino heritage living in Knoxville at the time.
The popularity of this street cuisine allowed Royston to upgrade from his cart to a storefront on Willow Avenue. And thanks to the tamale's popularity, a plethora of shops began popping up around the area.
They were listed with their own listing in the city directory in 1909, I believe. And it was always, and they had a whole category called tamale manufacturers in Knoxville. And they were all African-American entrepreneurs who were running little kitchens, mostly on the east side of the old city area.
For 30 years, Harry Royston hawked his tamales to the people of Knoxville before passing away in 1917. The tamale tradition would continue in the mom-and-pop kitchens of East Knoxville until a new tamale man came to town with a new take on the recipe. He set up shop right down the block where Royston's once was.
There was a guy after Harry Royston named Andrew Taylor that a lot of people remember making tamales down in the Patton Street, Willow Street area. For a long time, it was a really thick tamale that had a dark, almost black filling of meat that was a combination of beef and spices and maybe pork or something in there. It was a really interesting tamale.
Taylor's career of selling tamales lasted over 50 years, well into the 1970s. And soon after, another man rode into town with yet another take on the tamale.
A well-known guy named Charlie Greene came to town about the same time that Mr. Taylor left the scene.
Mr. Greene was, well, he moved here, but he's really from around Greenville, Mississippi, and we met him as a tamale man.
Charlie Greene brought the Delta-style tamale to Knoxville.
It's the tamale roll with leaving one end open, tall and skinny, and one end open.
Allen and Greene's Hot Tamales and Barbecue was located on University Avenue in Mechanicsville. Along with selling out of his restaurant, Greene took an old-school approach to selling his Deltas.
He prepares tamales. He'd put them in his cart, maybe a couple buckets of them. And then he would get on the street corners, everywhere, all over in Lonsdale, everywhere. Mr. Greene would sell his tamales. And he had good business because people loved him, And his cart was something like a little wagon, but it was just a push cart, with 4 wheels.
Greene's tamales were so renowned that they were written about in what Jack Neely considers the quintessential book on Southern cuisine, Southern Food by John Egerton.
I looked through that book when it came out, and I found only one reference to Knoxville for anything. We had a lot of restaurants, we had a lot of different kinds of things that some people were proud of. But the one thing that caught John Egerton's attention in Knoxville were the tamales that Charlie Greene was selling in Mechanicsville from a hand cart. And he said, these are the best tamales I've ever had in my life.
Charlie Greene's storefront caught fire in 1981, but he was able to rebuild and continued to sell his wares until the late 80s.
I'll tell you what she's doing. She's making tamales.
Once Greene closed shop, he passed on his wealth of tamale knowledge and recipes to sisters Mary Manuel and Clara Robinson, who opened Mary's Tamales on Magnolia Avenue in 1989.
Or like when you get tired of eating chicken and steak and stuff, you get something, you want that spicy taste, so you get you a tamale.
What's in the meat?
What's in the meat? My ingredients are in the meat that I can't tell you about.
Why?
Because you'll start making them yourself.
There was a man by the name of Mr. Tucker, and he was then the only tamale man in Greenville, Mississippi, and he made them in his home. And then he had this little building that he had sitting on the corner, you know, of a street, and he would sell them out of that little store. One room place, little bitty place.
The customer base at Mary's proved the impact that tamales had on the city over the previous century.
Everybody that liked the tamale that come in to buy them always give me a story about, oh, I love tamales, and somebody else used to make them, you know, but down through the line of their ancestors. Somebody made tamales, you know, and they love them, and then they always say, when we heard about yours, you know, so we heard that you had some good tamales.
The menu at Mary's also included sweet potato tarts and hot dogs, but another item had roots steeped in Knoxville history.
I want a full house, Mary.
Full house.
Yes, ma'am. I want the hot ones.
That's hot tamales with the chili over it. That means everything is in the bowl. That's why it's called Full House, you know. But you know, in Mississippi, we never heard about Full Houses. We only had the tamales.
My mother used to make them.
One small Full House.
I'll eat them out of a can, too, but they're not near as good as
$2.17.
The Full House is an interesting mystery. The idea of serving tamales and chili pops up here and there. There are Greek-owned restaurants that would serve a bowl of chili and with a tamale in it. And but for some reason here, they were called a Full House. And I don't know that that term was ever used in any other city.
Now you know to take the paper off. No, you don't eat the paper. You have to take that off.
The earliest I've seen it is 1935, but it became very popular right after that. And I don't know if that was the very beginning of it or what. But they were basically these kind of little restaurants that were sort of like sports bars, betting parlors, and things like that, and like in little walk-up places downtown, kind of like speakeasies. They would have the Full House, and the Full House, you know, it's a gambling term, you know, Full House and poker, and I bet that's where it came from.
Instead of tamale and chili, everybody just calls it Full House. As long as I can remember, that's what I always know it as, is Full House.
Mary Manuel passed in November 2000 from leukemia. But Clara continued on until the early aughts, until the doors finally closed on Mary's Tamales.
Mary's Tamales was one of a vanishing breed of just small, locally owned places in East Knoxville, just working people's places. And there aren't that many places. It seems like everything's going to change now. And the little tamale and barbecue places that there were probably 15 or so of them at least in the 90s. They've just kind of dwindled away. Well, I love the fact Good Golly is its own. They've taken their own ideas about tamales and kind of created something new that may develop in tradition, and it's very close to where the old tamale quarter is, that I call it, where the tamales were made 100 years ago.
Good Golly Tamale opened in the Old City in 2015 and offers a new age spin on the classic dish.
I think regionally people are used to like ground beef and sausage as a filling. Vegetarian ones, there's a cheese one, we even make a lamb one. There's even sweet tamales, apple, cinnamon, raisin tamales.
Owner Matt Miller, like so many in the area, grew up eating the dish that put his shop on the map.
There was always somebody, some church lady, made dozens of tamales, and we would have a bag, like a plastic bag in the freezer, and you know, Mom would boil them. We would have tamales and chili, seems like the first night, and then the second night we would microwave the leftover tamales and put mustard on them. I wanted to create something. It could have been anything, really. It just became tamales. Something that I felt like I could do with integrity. I just make what I like. And then hope other people like it. And I think that's a good approach.
So whether it's Good Golly Tamale or someone selling them out of their trunk at a church sale, it seems the tamale tradition is still alive and well in Knoxville.
And this happened 80 years before Knoxville had a Mexican restaurant, we were eating Mexican food in the form of tamales. So I think that's something worth remembering. The tamale and the full house is something about Knoxville cuisine that reminds us that there were other influences than just our home cooking, fried chicken and the hamburgers and things like that we grew up thinking of as American food. But we have this influence from other countries in our cuisine, even 140 years ago, that's good to acknowledge. But it's also important to remember the African American heritage and the evolution of tamale and the popularity of tamales here.
I think the best tamale really is made with love, made with good ingredients, and then about 2 minutes after it gets pulled out of the steamer, that's when it's really good.